Well, the White House confirming that 500 migrant children separated from their parents under the Trump administration's zero-tolerance border policy have been reunited with their families. That policy separated more than 5,000 children from their parents. The Biden administration still working to reunify roughly 700 of those children. And here to discuss, Deputy Director of the ACLU Immigrants' Rights Project, Attorney Lee Gellert. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the children who have been reunited with their parents. Are there any stories in particular that are standing out to you?
You know, the numbers tell one story, but each individual family is their own story. I think what we've seen over the years has just been horrific. I remember one of the first families that was reunited, and this was a while ago, but even during the Trump administration, pursuant to a court order, going to their home, and the mother told me the 4-year-old little boy just keeps asking, are they going to come and take me away again in the middle of the night? Another family, the child just stands, it was 3 years old, just stood by the window all the time, looking to see if men were going to take them away. These families have been so traumatized. Little children may live with this vulnerability for the rest of their lives. And so while we very much appreciate the Biden administration now having reunited 500, probably more than 500. At this point, the ACLU estimates that there's anywhere from 700 to more than 1,000 that still need to be reunited. These are little children who were taken away years ago now, who are still not back with their families. But the other thing I want to stress is that reunification is only the beginning of it. We need to do everything we can to make these families whole. I think most importantly, that means not re-separating the families and sending them back to danger. So we need to give them a pathway to remain in this country, as well as basic services, including trauma care relief, to help them get back on their feet. Because even once they're back with their parents, the trauma is just going to be there and needs to be remedied somehow. And I'll tell you that there's a lot to be put back with the families being put back, made whole, not just each individual child and each individual parent, but the relationship between the parent and the child. Because a lot of these children were too young to understand that their parents could not have stopped the separation. So they come back and they say, Mommy, Daddy, why didn't you stop them? Didn't you love me enough to keep me? And so that trust between the parent and the child needs to be rebuilt, and that's going to take a long time.
Of course, and children can't really understand the political forces that are at work and what is actually happening here. You mentioned the 700 to potentially 1,000 more. How soon could those families be reunited?
So they fall into a few groups. There are some of those families we have reached, and they're in the process of coming back, and we hope that the government can speed up that process and bring them back. But there's many other families that we haven't even reached yet. All are now have to recontact, because when we contacted them the first time, it was during the Trump administration. The Trump administration was not willing to bring them back and reunify them. So for those group, I don't know how long it's going to take. I mean, we are making steady progress finding these families with our partners all over the world. But it's hard to say how long it's going to take. I'm hoping that another 200, 300 are reunified in the next couple of months. But beyond that, it's hard to say. I will say that the ACLU and its partners do not intend to stop till every child is back with their parents.
And Lee, in the time we have left, I do want to ask, certainly this is such a politicized issue. This year, there was a record number of border crossers, more than 2 million this fiscal year. Certainly no one denying this is a humanitarian crisis. But how would you respond to those who say it is also, as much as it is a crisis for the migrants, a crisis for Customs and Border Patrol officials who are trying to process all of these asylum seekers, a crisis for these border towns who are frankly overwhelmed?
So what I would say is that we need to keep separate border policy and family separation. Because I think one thing that we learned in 2018 is that the American public, regardless of which side of the aisle you're on, does not want to use family separation as a tool. So however we deal with the border, we cannot take little children away from their parents. And I think that's why you saw Laura Bush come out with an op-ed in the Washington Post saying, look, my husband was a Republican president. He had different ideas about the border than Democrats. But the one thing as Americans we should all be clear about is we're not going to use babies and toddlers as pawns. So let's do the work to have a more efficient and fair process at the border for asylum seekers. but let's never go anywhere near again using little babies and toddlers as pawns.
Lee Gellert, I certainly appreciate your work and your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.